Hello everyone and welcome to another LSA CPD. Let me choose my virtual background so it looks like I'm in the LSA. My name is Jason Sayer, here with the LSA. Today we have, let me stop my screen, there we go. Today we have Maria Chiara Piccinelli of PiM.Studio. And this talk will be talking, or this CPD will touch on rewilding the city. And CPD will discuss what rewilding the city actually looks like and what that means for architects and designers, particularly on a glorious day like today, when you can really envision nature and filtering into our cities as well today. For those of you who it's their first time coming to CPDs with the LSA, the premise is that we give talks around 30 minutes and then discussion and Q&A after, equal bidding towards that. So if you have any questions, do put them in the chat and I can read them out, or you can unmute yourself and allow your video after the talk as well to have a discussion. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our guest today, Maria Chiara of PiM.Studio. Maria, you there? Oh, there we are, great.
Okay, hello, hi everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much to the LSA and Jason for inviting me. And we are here today, as we said, to talk about rewilding architecture. So what rewilding means? Rewilding is about reintegrating wildlife and wildlands where species have disappeared, while restoring natural ecosystem with a less human-centric approach. Since men start to build inhabitable structure, architecture has been intended to protect human beings from elements and honestly to separate them from natural environment. This anthropocenic view has driven humans for centuries, try to build up control of their own environment and everything else. We try so very hard to control the environment. And in some very interesting occasion where humans live, then nature takes back control in very powerful and fascinating ways. Nature is able to adapt and reuse what is there and what it found and make now amazing spaces out of it. So cities, of course, are man-made, and a lot of the natural environment are now fundamentally man-made. Both are very carefully controlled, and then in this case, in very dense urban settles, as well in low density, as well sometimes we go a bit crazy and out of control. But even most natural rural areas in the so-called developed countries are equally man-made in search of full control, including when they generate beautiful landscape and good wine, they're still very much man-made. So much that when we see a bit of unplanned wilderness, then it looks completely surreal, but it wouldn't be nice if we could design our city and buildings to accept and encourage wilderness. In my opinion, we should stop considering man-made civilization and natural world in opposition. With the work that we do at PiM.Studio, we are trying to move away from an anthropocentric vision of the built and non-built environment in favor of a deeper and more meaningful integration between cities, nature, and all living beings. Nature has already adapted to us, even in unfortunate circumstances. Are we able to adapt to nature? A notable example of rewilding in London is the Wild West End initiative. They are actively working to encourage birds, bees, bats back into this iconic area of London and create a greater connection with nature for the residents, visitors, and workers to enjoy. But again, we end up having this very unsettled relationship between nature and architecture. Looking at history of architecture, if we go back and see Loger in his drawing in the primitive hut, he brings forward a pro-Greek classicism idea and reacts against the Baroque ornamentation and decoration of his days. The primitive hut idea supports a back to nature philosophy, a romantic idea which gained popularity in the mid-18th century. Architecture, that is the young woman that you can see in the drawing, is pointing to a new structural clarity found in nature, where man can find shelter and protection from the outside threats. In the past, the architectural forms were very intuitive and direct translation of the needs of the community. For example, we can see here the monastery in Alcobaça. It was built in the mid-12th century, and at that time there were over 900 monks using the monastery. And by the late 18th century, had a reputation of overindulgence, especially in food. This, for example, is the colossal chimney in the kitchen, which was designed to accommodate an entire ox over the fire pit. And the basin where the river water ran through the whole monastery, and the cook could catch fresh fish directly for dinner. So you can start seeing how architecture is designed to include also other animals in addition to human beings. So in our proposal for the Seven Oak Visitor Center, we have brought this concept forward. The proposal for this new visitor center building aims at creating harmony with the surrounding nature in two ways. On one hand, the building engages with the surrounding landscape by opening itself towards the outside, especially on the lake side and the nature side at the back, through a large outdoor lake terrace and outdoor studio to the north. On the other hand, we seek to integrate nature into the building by maximizing opportunity for the reserved flora and fauna. We use the building as part of the natural environment. A simple triangular timber structure, a roof with various pitches, elegantly creates a shelter for all the required function of the visitor center with a simple and flexible manner. The roof is designed naturally to encourage the growth of moss. We imagine an architecture that is welcoming, soft, and porous. By designing different typologies of interstitial spaces all around the building scheme, including the roof and the external facade and under the building, we encourage small animals such as birds, bats, and all the others to make the building their own home. The whole architecture is thought to be an ecosystem with multiple niches for species of every type. We bring wildlife at the design table as part of the client body. We want to include other species into our design, not as an afterthought, but as a process. And here we see like how we can start inhabited, like we can see the interstitial spaces can be inhabited. We believe that these in-between spaces can provide added value to projects and offer unexpected opportunity to a free and personal way of experiencing the architecture. In-between spaces are the spaces where encounter can happen. And architecture should definitely create this possibility of encounter at any point. We are working on as well on a private house in Geneva, which is under construction now, and we have been finding ways of incorporating into the design some of the principles that we have learned into our research. The house is quite simple, and it is designed around a center green patio. It comes from a traditional patio Japanese house where the center patio is called Subaniwa. And those are used to provide a touch of nature to connect the outdoor and the indoor, and to make the indoor space seems large and act as a light wells as well as a passive ventilation that otherwise in like kind of the houses is quite difficult to breathe. So at the end of the day, we can see that the house is actually sitting in between the garden and the patio. We wanted as well to connect with nature, not just by morphology of the architecture, but also with the use of natural material and local. While we are using bricks that are made from the soil of the site, And we will paint the walls with natural clay that will naturally control the humidity inside of the house. Finally, the green roof will increase the architectural biodiversity and donate a soft view from the bedroom windows to the first floor. Again, the traditional Japanese house comes as a really nice reference. In Japan, traditional architecture, we can see the relationship between buildings and nature is very different from the Western one. So finding harmony between architecture and nature is one of the principles deeply rooted in traditional architecture. Again, the house really touches the earth lightly, and the relationship between inside and outside is split in many layers. So the body of architecture expands and grows into a proper space in between. The building is raised off the ground slightly to create space under the house that will allow for free environment of small animals and invertebrates to move around. So the house does not act as a barrier. By creating in-between spaces that expand the inside-outside boundary concept, we can meet the needs of the family as well as the needs of the other species. Small animals can find shelter under the terrace and in the pond, or part of the roof. I personally think that the issue of control is a key element of the relationship between human and nature. We often want to hold on tight to control, but it's foolish to think that you can fully control the natural world. In my opinion, this is an illusion. Actually, the biologist Rob Dunn in Never Home Alone show us that if we are to truly thrive in our homes, we must learn to welcome the unknown guest that have been there the whole time. So I believe the architecture should be an ecosystem of its own, as I said, and should be able to breathe and live. And we should be part of it, enjoying it, like the couple that you can see sitting in their living room, enjoying a glass of wine. And this can only happen through integration. From our point of view, this means designing architecture that is open and porous and offer new opportunities. We want to introduce nature within our design. As well as I was mentioning, the material that we use are all natural, and you can see, let's say, in the construction itself that the house can breathe. So while we zoom in so close, I would like to also talk with you about a project from Andrea Branzi in his collection that is called Domestic Animals. He joined man-made and natural material, exposing the links between seemingly opposing concepts. For example, nature and technology, landscape architecture, wildness and civilization. If we could focus on the integration and collaboration instead of separation, we will be able to create opportunities. For example, this design will not work without the handle, it will burn herself. This is something we looked at in the other proposal I would like to show you, that is the Valsolda music room that we've been invited to put together a proposal for a small competition in Italy, in the Alps, in the north of Italy. So again, when Valsolda Philharmonic Hall has been designed in relationship to his natural context. So the mountains surrounding the valley are the protagonist of the project. We wanted to minimize the visual impact from the highest point of the mountain with, let's say, a complete integration of the building with the surrounding. So the new architecture is designed in continuity, as I said, with the landscape. The green roof integrates the volume within the section of the earth. Only at night, the music hall transforms into a lantern for the village and reveals his presence. Even from the inside, from the stage, has a large opening that creates a frame of the opposite mountain and serves as a background to the main stage of the auditorium. This arrangement is again reminiscent of the archaic typology of the Hellenic theater, where Greek architects like to sit their theaters in such a place that give the audience a spectacular view of the landscape, not just of the theater itself. So the use of green roof, again, is of critical importance in this project, maintaining a continuity of the natural element and the vegetation, including different species and autochthonous plants and flowers. We want a continuous exchange between inside and outside, and between architecture and the beauty of the landscape. We can find exactly the same collaborative approach in various examples of vernacular architecture, where we see a deep respect and communion with the natural environment, the perfect balance between material and shape and the natural context. Another great example of architecture that integrates animals and humans are the Tower of Silence. We see an integral pacifism, a strategy for a cosmic hospitality where dead are kept together with life, poor together with the rich, sacred ground together with the car traffic. Percy have built those towers in stones at the entrance of the city for dead bodies to be exposed to the carrion birds and vultures, following the idea of life as a circle. One great example of life as a circle are butterflies, and we can definitely include those into our cohabitation in the cities. For example, this is another proposal of a hanging garden in St. Paul. Through this proposal, we wanted to encourage London wildlife and connect people with nature. An environmental project that promotes a new elevated garden for the growth of butterflies. The proposed garden is a combination of native plants and quick-grown annual flowers to bring to the center of the city a sense of nature while improving the air quality and the biodiversity. The plants will help retaining moisture in the air and reduce the urban heat island effect, creating a space of rest to cross surrounded by a place of rest to cross surrounded by butterfly. They can help people to relax and get more in contact with the natural world. We can see again architecture as an ecosystem and a community of interactive organisms using architecture as a common ground. Again, we find opportunities everywhere. For example, we looked in Milan. This is a winning competition entry for Malaspina Master Plan for office, retail, residential, leisure, public spaces with a total floor area of 70,000 square meters. Again, nature in this case keeps the architecture together. In our proposal, we actually focus in the idea of a glamorous green living. We imagine an alternative and unconventional urban style that combines city density, services, technology to the principle of a healthy lifestyle immersed in nature, and equip nature that can be experienced and enjoyed by all its inhabitants. So again, actually, you can see how architecture is so different one to another, but what is continuous and it brings again the whole design together is the design of the outdoor spaces. Of course, architecture is meant to protect human beings, but this does not mean it cannot also be good for other species too. In this house, designed by the Japanese architect Shinohara-san for a Japanese poet, it lies in the mountain of Nagano prefecture, and it was built in 1974. This is a summer house, an act of simply covering a piece of earth, making it into habitation only by the means of a roof, protecting the soil of the ground. It is important that we don't start from the idea of separation inside, outside, and that architecture is the thing that separates them. We need to start rethinking architecture as a less rigid element. The house actually lies on a slope in the middle of the forest as exposed timber frame structure which supports a large pitch roof. Inside, it reveals a space ambiguously suspended between a natural land and architectural landscape with no specific function. We need to design buildings that are collaborative across species, humans and soil. This may sound a bit radical, but maybe we believe that we need to definitely re-articulate the relationship between humans, other species, nature, and technologies. Architecture, in my opinion, is about creating new relationships. With a community group, we are working on a project for East London Waterworks Park. By removing the fence, we can reconnect this plot of the Lower Lynn Valley, granting open public access, offering people the opportunity to immerse themselves in nature. We want to transform the 6 hectares depot in a brownfield rainforest. And to do so, we are starting from what is already there, the filter beds. There is an immense potential in the history of the place. And the infrastructure, architecture, soil, water, light, they all form the identity of this place. And we can narrate a new chapter of this story. Now we imagine this land owned by the community with what is best for the environment at the forefront of every decision. Starting to uncover part of the filter beds to create pools for wild swimming, we want to chip away the concrete, crush it into different grades and create habitats for invertebrates. Planting and natural rewilding will do the rest, creating a mosaic of habitats and turning a concrete wasteland into brownfield rainforest. A brownfield site teaming up with nature to create connection and encounters between people and wildlife. We want to refurbish the fantastic buildings that are already on site and give them a new lease of life as a community spaces. We would like to adopt a self-built skill share approach to construction to build a lot of experience within the local community. We imagine a place that is democratic and accessible, that negates isolation and alienation and allows us to feel that we are an integral part of things. So often brownfield sites are seen as suitable only for intensive development, and we want to show there is another narrative possible, that there can be a way to restore the impact. There can be a way to reduce the impact of climate change and biodiversity loss and help people to relearn how to live in harmony with nature. As David Attenborough says, the best sustainable building being built today are next generation of renewable energy that purify the air around them. They treat their own waste well, create soil for sewage, and offer permanent homes for an abundance of animals and plants. The future, it might be possible for cities to give back rather than just take. So we wanted to bring the concept at the heart of our profession. We wanted to rewire the RIBA, a zero waste exhibition at the Royal Institute of British Architects. Our proposal was a praise for nature. We wanted to transform the RIBA Architecture Gallery into a temporary garden, challenging the boundaries between city and nature, inside and outside. Architecture should be for all, not just for human beings. And we need to acknowledge that the more variety we introduce, the better it is for us as well as for the others. We believe in cohabitation as a wider approach to integrating nature and human species, using architecture as a prototype. We need to deliberately give up control in some places and create dialogue rather than boundaries. Again, Andrea Branzi says, the animals are magic presence. When you introduce a fragment of nature into a project, it emits an infinite power superior to the whole geometrical system of modernity, while its uniqueness makes it almost sacred. So at the Royal Academy, actually, they have given us permission to do it. So we proposed a woodland inside the Royal Academy. It was a temporary installation that brings nature inside the Royal Academy of Arts, inviting visitors to rediscover a deeper and more intimate relationship with the natural realm. We have created an indoor temporary forest by installing 25 Norman fir in the central saloon of the John Madesky Fine Rooms. The sustainably sourced trees have been donated post the exhibition to Hackney Council, who had planted them in the London parks, and as part of their green regeneration project. Finally, we even designed the woodline gin and tonic as part of the evening signature drinks. So thank you. This was us in our research.
Thank you very much, Maria. Do you want to stop sharing your screen? That way people, yes, it's better. So people can put the questions into the chat. I can read them out. Again, if you're feeling super duper confident, you can unmute yourself. As always, I've written down quite a few questions so I can kick things off. So I'd be curious about how you began kind of digging into what, pardon the pun, of contemporary kind of rewilding techniques. I think there's a tension between like rewilding is doing nothing, right? And then there's encouraging ecological activity in the city. And I'm wondering like where you draw the line with that and how you go about deciding that.
Yes, actually the fact of defining rewilding is very important. Which kind of definition of rewilding we are looking at and how we apply this, let's say, to our way of living and our way of designing, I think is essential. So what we can see is that why we are so interested in rewilding, because actually rewilding is not something that consider, let's say, his action without the man input. Actually, we are very much part of nature as, let's say, humankind. So rewilding is actually trying to kind of bring back wildlife together with humans. So humans are very much part of this process, and acknowledging, let's say, the wildlife can be part of our cities, in my opinion, is the first step that we should make.
Sure. Got a question I'm going to read out from Chow. And they ask, what was the reason to use pine trees in the Royal Academy?
Yes, mainly the reason was, as I said, was a temporary installation. Actually, it was one night installation and was during winter time. And the main reason was to actually start a dialogue, to say how the nature and the trees, they are in dialogue with these kind of like magnificent rooms that they have at the Royal Academy. So like the architecture is able to host, our point was the architecture is able to host more than just, let's say, paintings and sculpture and what we're used to see in the indoor spaces, but we can look into like making more flexible, integrating nature as well as, let's say, man-made objects.
The follow-up, I think they were asking why pine specifically?
Pine specifically, because we're very, very cheap. We were in December, and actually they were, yes, it was like really easy to find, and they allow us to fill the room with like on a very low budget. As you can imagine, like a restriction in budget is always there. But then what was really nice is we were actually able to find trees that had where the roots were not cutted. So basically the roots, I mean, they were pot, but they grew in the pot. So it was possible to replant them and have actually a second life. While very often the trees that are for sale during Christmas time, they will not have a longer life, a very long life, because they are grown in soil and they are, let's say, cut out of the soil. So all their roots, they are going to be chopped. That's why they will last, if you're lucky, maybe 1 year, or maybe one season. So that actually the fact that we were able to find these sustainable trees, it was really let's say, was really good, and to involve also with the Hackney Council in order to replan them, again, was kind of giving me back to the community once more.
Sure. Got a question from Katie, which I'll ask. How do you integrate accessibility considerations into your proposals?
Yes, this is very, super important questions. Like, for example, in the wildlife project, we understand that when you start, let's say, dealing with spaces that are, as I said, like out of control, because this is very often the kind of purpose of kind of losing the control and giving part of the control back to nature. It can happen that spaces are difficult to access, let's say, but for example, in the natural wild swimming, we recognize that wild swimming is so hard, for example, for people of different abilities to actually enjoy it. So in our opinion, bringing it back to the city and actually using infrastructure that can be, like, for example, the tanks that are already designed, that are already there, that we could use for wild swimming, we can definitely make those very much accessible for, as I said, for different able people, like maybe on a wheelchair, because the structure, it can allow, let's say, other, like all the users, and it's something that we always need to keep in mind, like keep in consideration. So creating opportunities for everyone, that's like really important. And creating opportunity is not saying that everyone every time should access everywhere, and especially like not even actually like human beings are the same. It should be in the same category, like so creating spaces that are just for nature, for example, like some in this, because I talk about this because it's quite big project, like the natural swimming project has like a big part of the site that we envisage of not being accessible by anyone, just by the wild animals. So like we want to really rebalance, no? Like the fact that there are spaces that is fine, that are just accessible by the wild, and spaces that should be accessible for all, definitely. Like I think in as a designer, our responsibility is to find the right balance.
Sure, thank you. Got another question which I'll read out. Integrating these built forms with nature is great in reducing the material footprint in cities. What strategies are there to reduce the need for maintenance with large-scale projects?
Yes, I think, again, great question, because something we keep saying is that we need to give everyone the tools to maintain and care about their buildings. This is, like, in my opinion, is really the first step where we actually give the community and the people that use the building the tools of maintaining them. Because like, it's, I think, foolish, again, to think that you need to achieve something that doesn't need maintenance. Actually, everything needs maintenance, and everything needs love, and people need to be able to maintain their spaces, to maintain their architecture. So exposing, let's say, services, making it easy and simple to maintain things is the way to move forward, because actually people can do their own maintenance, can take care about their buildings. And I think the architecture, as I said, is always an exchange, you know, it's always something that is in between things. And if you make it easy for people and nature to use and to kind of adapt the architecture to their needs, then is the key is the key to make them loving your architecture and to actually care about it. Like, we need to really avoid thinking that we need to lower maintenance, but we need to actually increase the possibility for people to maintain things and to love them and to maintain their buildings.
I think there's going to have to be kind of a culture change with regards to that, because people will have to become more green-fingered and more keen to get their kind of hands dirty in every sense.
Yes, in every sense, exactly, totally, Jason.
Another question from Temi. It's clear to see the benefits and significance of rewilding, but when do you think that rewilding will be popular enough for it to be considered in most projects?
I think that we face, let's say, a really big change and shift that we all need to make. And climate change will kind of push and require everyone to really embrace a different attitude, to really think about the post-Anthropocene as a key element of the thinking and the design process. So I think it should be soon rather than later, like it should be actually yesterday, but definitely it will be necessary very, very soon. It is already necessary, but even to people that are not seeing as a priority, it should be made as a priority by us, by the designer, because we have the power of, as I said, the in the talk I was saying like that we try to put nature within the client body, and this is up to us. It's up to us as a designer to kind of promote and to kind to say design for who doesn't have a voice, that usually is let's say is earth and the natural landscape. And again, like we should not often, I think when we talk about sustainability, the first question from the client is why so expensive? Is it expensive? Like if I want to be sustainable, then I need to pay more. But then I think we need to look into like a bigger idea of expensive, a bigger idea of paying the price, because actually if we use let's say low quality material, if we use material that exploit the earth, basically is the earth, is let's say the pollution, and is the like everything like a kind of exploiting other people that are paying the price that we are not paying by, let's say, designing something that's this cheap. So the price is always there. It's just that if we are fair in our design and in our attitude, then the architecture will be fair with the world. That's yeah, one of my strong principles as well.
Thank you. Got a question from Lena, which I'll read out as well. Following on from the last question, I don't know if that quite relates to chronologically, but anyway, integrating nature in terms of plant life, insects, etc., is a start. But how do you think we can integrate more animals back into cities to increase nature and reduce travel of our food, for example? For instance, goats could be used to naturally graze green areas, reducing maintenance while providing meat and milk.
Absolutely, exactly as you said. Like if Hackney Council would include in the, let's say, green team, team of 5 goats, then this will bring back nature in our cities. Actually, there are several projects, again, like if you look at Brandsey, like he was proposing to include, to bring back big animals within the city to low and slow down traffic. I mean, if in the big cities you have goats or cows like running around the city, then naturally people will slow down, naturally cars will slow down. There will be a whole new, let's say, awareness of animals and life that is, let's say, beyond what we actually see now. And if you visit, let's say, Asian countries, like it is so clear, no? And so like if you go to India, but as well as Japan, you have like many places where actually nature is part of the daily life. And even in big cities, like Southern Asia is like full of monkeys everywhere, and they are within the city environment. I'm not talking about the jungle side. I'm talking really like inside of the street, like when you cross the street is you and like a few more monkeys, and then and the goat and the cows. And again, we should bring back the animals to the city in order to educate people that we are not alone, that it's not just about making the city great, and like it's not just about making the city a controlled environment for humans, but it's actually, there are things that are out of our control, but then we will be able to accept them.
Mm-hmm. And Charles kind of responded to that and said, but why do we want to bring animals to the city? Brownfields biodiversity value is much higher than countryside agriculture land.
Definitely,
yeah.
Yes. Because I think agriculture land is not like the reference of a natural environment. Unfortunately, we know, I mean, if we want to touch just a little bit about the soil and the quality of the soil, it is at the moment we are facing again like a huge problem in the next 30 years, that our soil is so poor that will not be able to give us any more, let's say, food, and will not be able to provide let's say, enough nutrients in the plants. So agriculture is not the place to look for references, in my opinion. And why we want, and exactly like we have a huge quantity of biodiversity within the city and adaptation of nature to our environment. I think personally that we should actually say encourage this and actually lower our control and increasing, like giving even more spaces to this biodiversity to thrive, because I think now it's just like it's kind of feeding on a small and abundant spaces. So that's where the real true biodiversity in the city happens, where the space is abandoned or temporarily unloved or temporarily unused by humans.
Mm-hmm.
How can we actually make a place that is used and and that is a place of like true integration?
Sure. Got a question from Tim. Do we need policy changes to encourage rewilding, such as more regulations or incentives?
Yes, I think rewilding per se works really well at the big scale. So like rewilding, when you discuss rewilding on, let's say, big natural reserve, then is where you actually can see a great result in terms of benefit to the land, benefit to the soil, benefit to the air. Let's say when you look into the city environment, I think the regulation should be really very much focusing on, let's say, deep paving, opening up the soil, making connection, like bringing nature, like the deep connection with nature, not just kind of greening or like pushing designers to kind of stick few plants in, but it is really the fact that cities then need to kind of allow for a bit more breathability in terms of like a soil, how to say, like a water, natural water collection, but as well like having, let's say, pockets of nature that they grow by themselves. So maybe the policies, they should kind of regulate try to stop this kind of clearance that happens days after days after days by the council and by the people that are actually trying to control very much our environment, and are like kind of paving all over the neighbors. And I think this will actually help very much to imagine a city that has, they say, pocket of nature everywhere, not like a kind of spontaneously growing, because they are not stopped by our attitude.
Sure. Question from Oyen. Are there any strategies in place in your designs that take into account the safety of animals or plants being integrated into space, or is there a soft barrier that protects them from us humans?
So I think mainly it's nice when we approach a design, especially on, say, on a private client, for example. It's nice to look for opportunities where maybe there are no danger for any of the two species, they say. So like, as I said, the roof is great. I mean, the roof is something that we know very well is a great space for integration of biodiversity. But then underneath the house, for example, is again somewhere like where actually people don't really care, they don't go. So, but it can be a vital element for nature and for undergrowth to kind of thrive and to find their environment, and actually designing with this in mind, let's say living pockets or like even spaces in between properties, or where we see often like we are obliged now by regulation to kind of leave minimum distances. And so why don't we treat this an opportunity actually to kind of reserve pocket to nature? And then again, maybe you make it a bit more difficult to access by the people. So you kind of make it a bit higher, or you make it uncomfortable to reach. So if they are, let's say, uncomfortable, you will see that people just don't want to go. It's not even necessary to put a fence because it's so, yes, uncomfortable. You don't really want to go there.
Sure. I'm kind of curious between or about another tension between green cities are from I guess an energy perspective, and then from a rewilding perspective or biophysics perspective, because green cities are very dense, and because if they're very dense, they're very sustainable because people can walk to places, right? However, by increasing density, that is just more building like fabric. So I'm wondering at what, like, how rewilding can be woven into kind of that narrative and what its place kind of immediately. I mean, does it come after densification, or is it something that comes before? Is it, how does that as a kind of a green strategy for cities kind of take place? So it's
again, like, what I think, I mean, we need to start everywhere, anywhere, like every corner, every little spot. I believe as well, like the cities are great because of density, because people are close to each other. We don't occupy too much land. We just like kind of stick together, and we can find a good community that can support each other. But then as well, like when we do building city in dense environment, we always use materials that are very hard, materials that, for example, like the paving is always, we use a lot of concrete, we use a lot of asphalt. And if we start by reducing those materials, that we start introducing biomaterials, imagine if the whole sidewalks of London, like all the little tiny let's say walls that are dividing different properties, if those were built in natural material, this will change immediately the quantity of natural life you can actually bring within the city. So I think by choosing like very little and decided to kind of put your effort in little elements that are then repeating all over your city, then you will introduce much more of, let's say, natural life. For example, like we are working with a research group in Mumbai. They have a, let's say, research center where they develop these bio bricks. And basically the bricks are, they're made of loofah. Let's say they are like, there is a very big long recipe to make those bricks. But then the bricks itself is based on, let's say, your local soil. So basically the soil that you use in order to mix the bricks and to make it, and then to bake it, it will make a completely different brick every time you use it, or every city you use it in. So then every city will have their special own, let's say, bio brick, and these bricks that are porous and porous enough to, let's say, include invertebrates into their structure. So really after, so imagine like using this for all the parks of London, like all the little walls and everything we built out of necessity, because maybe we need to separate properties. But if we start using, for example, biomaterials, then it will completely change the face of our cities.
Mm-hmm. I do have another question. I was also kind of interested in about, so a bat study is usually in architects, like they hate them sometimes. They can like end a project, right? But it seems like to you that like it's probably maybe the start of a project with regards to kind of rewilding being a focus. So I'm kind of curious how you start a rewilding project, such as the Seven Oaks Centre or that house in Geneva, the initial steps that you took for having the right approach towards rewilding.
Yes, what we always say that you should start from what you have already. So like looking at the site, looking at what is the site can offer, using everything that is there. So even, I mean, of course, if you have a building, use the building as much as possible. Don't, let's say, lose an opportunity of refurbish a building. But then as well, everything else that is on site has, let's say, great power. For example, the soil, the water, the energy production possibilities that you have. And I don't know, now, again, we are working with a co-housing group on a proposal for a small building, a residential building, not so big, it's like 11 units, but then it's very close to a canal. So we are trying to, for example, use the water of the canal as much as possible. Like really, we want this building to be powered by nature. So like, and I think this starts what what you find on site. So always look at native species, and if there is a colony of, if you're lucky enough to find a colony of birds, trying to include it as much as possible into your design. And again, I know regulations often they go against actually the regulation that try to protect, for example, the environment are based on the same idea that we need to separate, we need to protect the environment as it is. It means that humans should not be part of it. And I think this is the main, let's say, point where we are actually against it. Like it's the main idea that we don't share, no? Like because people should be part of nature. That we are, and definitely, like also regulations, they should envisage, they should understand this and think about, let's say, a more circular or like a more yeah, you should look at all the, let's say, the factors, not just protecting one and not allowing the rest, but I say inclusivity again.
Thank you. There's an interesting conversation regarding in the chat about goats. If anyone wants to read it, I'm not gonna, because it's quite extensive, so I'm not gonna read it out. But it's certainly there for those who'd like to read it. It's quite.
Sorry, I didn't read it.
I was gonna I'm also intrigued by kind of notions of control. So for buildings to kind of meet passive house standards, you do have to have quite a lot of thermal control over that building, right? But then kind of the notion of rewilding is about relinquishing control. And so what, again, like where do you kind of, where are you drawing the line there, and how are you making kind of architectural decisions with those two things in mind?
Yes, again, like I think there are many discussions to be held, say, on this topic, like you know, passive house, and there are like a lot of literature and philosophy against this. The backup, of course, the need of like the fact that 100% of control will bring us to lower our carbon, of course, and to lower the need of energy, for example. And but again, in my opinion, the answer is always a balance. We cannot think that separating inside and outside and controlling our environment to the maximum will bring happiness and will bring places of let's say quality of life, because actually we need an holistic approach. We cannot always think, I mean, we should think that we have different spheres. So it's like, it's not just about consuming energy, it's also about enjoying the space. It's about feeling, let's say, breathe, make the space breathe. So like what we are doing, for example, is trying to use, let's say, breathable structures. They are actually very good. They have a very good performance, but they also have very good mass and thermal mass. So it means that you can actually have a facade that is, let's say, that is free and is free for air to pass through, but because of its mass, then is so that controls the environment automatically. Like, for example, if that's the main difference, not between a passive house that is in lightweight construction, everything is very light. So it means that like you have your facade has like great performance because like it kind of keeps to like the control environment inside
Okay.
well under control. But then as soon as you, for example, stop the heating or stop the mechanical ventilation, then you have so many problems. No, like you have mold, you have a lot of, you cannot control naturally the environment, and this is what actually I believe it makes much more sense. So maybe we should sometimes look back and like think and understand, for example, that the thermal mass is so important. So if we lose a bit, or like if we use materials that are heavier, like for example, as we are doing in the Geneva house, we are using like a really high dense wood insulation, because this has like a much better properties of, for example, a lightweight insulation, and because it is able to, let's say, keep the heat within the thickness of the walls. Or like, for example, we are searching quite a lot about hempcrete. Again, hempcrete is very natural, but it's also very heavy. It means that the wall will not exchange temperature in a so easy and fast way, in order not to need to control the inside spaces as much, because they will be automatically regulated by the thermal mass. And I think, yes, using those let's say thoughts, then like you can actually find let's say new ways, or maybe old ways in a way.
That's a good point, actually. I was also interested to, again, between kind of two conflicts between light touch and then being part of the landscape. So I think, was it Peter Buchanan kind of would argue as well that kind of the problem with modernity, as like summarized from Villa Savoie, is that humanity tries to elevate itself above nature and like has this view, again, like this kind of this viewpoint of looking down and dominion and control. However, there's a case made for buildings to be kind of more embedded within to landscapes. However, you could argue, I'm just wondering, I'm kind of spitballing here, if you kind of share the opinion that which is kind of more destructive to the landscape in which a building inhabits. And if there's never a be all and end all, like you should do this and you should do that. Obviously each one is very different. However, it's just an interesting conflict which those looking to be ecological, those looking to rewild have to face. And do we go something that's light touch, or do we go for something that is much more embedded within to the natural landscape in which it inhabits? And I was wondering again, like how you as a practice are dealing with that.
Actually, what I believe is depending on the site.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Very much. I think it is very much. I mean, as practice, we do like as I quickly show you, like a very small project or very big ones, and many of them like not in the UK. And I think this, in a way, has been as like a way of looking at things every time with a new perspective and with like a new questions. We are not, let's say, taking for granted any approach, because like one approach could work very well on one side, while a completely different approach could work much better on another side. So again, looking at the site, looking at the power of the site, because as I said, the site has his own character that already, like, you know, the genius loci, like is something that we should just embrace and understand, and the fact that of working in very different conditions, as well as very different climate conditions, I think is so powerful when you do a project in a kind of hot country.
Yeah.
When I mean, the whole system is start to unfold, no? Like because everything you're being taught in a way, like during university or like where you grow up, is completely different. Like you have seasons that are completely different, and as architects, I mean, we have the tools of actually designing for different temperature, different ecosystems, and so that's why I think our job is the best.
I think what I really like about this approach is that you're constantly in dialogue with the site in which the building is inhabiting. But again, going back to the question of informing your approach, what is the site kind of telling you that lets you make the decisions you've alluded to? Like, what are the kind of first kind of I don't know what I'm trying to ask here, but the key things a site will tell an architect looking to rewild?
Yes, for example, like I think the small project in the Alps that I was showing you earlier, like this Philharmonic room. Again, I think in that specific case, what it was very important for us, it was the view from the mountains. So for all the mountains around it, and like how actually the building will impact very much into the view from above. So like this fifth facade, actually it was that is the roof, that it became like the first facade. And what we didn't want to kind of interrupt the continuity of the landscape, but the continuity of the mountain itself. While, of course, we recognize the need for the community to have a space, let's say, to have a space that they can share, and to have a space that can be recognized. So that's where we kind of, we understood the importance of this idea of the lantern, like that during the night, it kind of brings together the community, also because probably the events, the main events will be during nighttime or late evening, and is really when the building had the need to shine. While during the day, maybe during rehearsal, it could really feel part of the landscape. It could actually use the landscape as, let's say, a backdrop, as I was saying, like using this big window to look outside to nature. It is actually very traditional from the Hellenic theater, where you actually, nature is the backdrop of the theater, is where the theater is happening, is as important as the theater itself. So in that case, we thought, okay, here is what we really dig it up, and we hide the building underneath the ground, underneath the soil, because we had strong reasons, and the strong reasons were, I mean, it was the site kind of calling it for it.
Great. Well, that's quite a fitting way to end. Sort of like, if anyone has missed it, the conversation about goats and now lawns in the chat is quite fascinating. I'm going to try and see if I can export that chat and send it.
Yeah, please do. Like I also, I was in contact, like I know the goat guy, there is a designer, he's a British designer. I don't know this, but anyway, I was invited to a review, and he was like a part of the panel as well. And so interesting, like he was living with the goat for, I don't know, like for 2 months, and it's like so interesting research. And he was there, like doing with going around with the goats, and then in his research, for example, like he was looking at how do we make a toaster. How can you make, like with your bare hands, a toaster? And then he did all this kind of research, huge research, in order to understand how to make a toaster. And finally, I mean, he could make it, but he was like an impossible act just to make a toaster. So that's also where I think I was like, yeah, I mean, the goat, there is no really direct connection. I mean, it's the same guy, they did the same, they're part of the same project, but like, this is where also was making the connection of being able to, let's say, to modify the building, or to kind of take care about the building, making it easy for people to care about their building, so exposing the services and really let them understand how to use the building, how to care about it, how to love it. I think is essential for architects to kind of to do. Is our responsibility.
Okay, if I could keep you for maybe a couple more minutes, Maria, because there's an important question from Kevin, which I don't want to miss. And it's about, because as a practice, you're approaching quite complicated scientific, philosophical, planning and technical issues. And Kevin was wondering how you consult engineers to help deal with those technical matters, such as the building structural integrity, etc. He was just asking about if you do, how you do that. And
yes, yeah, we do very much, of course. Like, I mean, I didn't put too much into the presentation, also because like it was a short one. I couldn't take too much time, and but yes, mainly we have let's say we have a team of consultants that we work very well with, and that they have the same ethos, kind of the same approach. So often for structure with, let's say at the moment, actually 90% of our project they use PiM.Studio. So yes, there is a office that we work with. Let's say we work very smoothly with them, and for M&E. M&E is a key designer. Let's say environmental and mechanical is really a key that you need to find someone that is really on the same page, that he really wants to kind of, it puts forward the work, let's say, to make a building work and to really find the best solution that can fit the building. And again, often a big company like, I don't know, Arup, and I mean, if the client allows, to say, or the budget allow. Often I found that like a big company is really interesting to work with, because they have like a huge amount of knowledge within them. So in the same company, you have environmental, mechanical, electrical, and maritime, for example, is also something that we use, and if there is a company that can, let's say, that has a big umbrella where you have many different consultants under the same company, then it's so much easier because they can coordinate within them, and then they can give you feedback on all the, let's say, the questions that you have. So yes, please. I think I mean, I can recommend several, either M&E or structural consultant, because having a team that is really part of that share your same ethos is essential. I still need to find a very good, let's say, conservation consultant, because like I found it like it is difficult. It's true, because like if you want to really kind of, conservation is all about like kind of keeping things, preserving, and actually what we talk is always about evolving. It's about changing and accepting the change. I mean, accepting decay is like a huge part of our approach. Like when you accept the decay, you accept that the building will grow old, and like you, in this, let's say, being old, it is beautiful as well. Then like I think, yeah, I think it is like we will have a good result.
Okay, great. I'm going to wrap things up there, but just in case, Milena sent a really interesting link called citygrazing.org, which unsurprisingly is about goats, which I love. If those in the chat want to continue this conversation, let me know, and I might try and figure out a way how that can happen. But other than that, I just want to say thank you for all those who came for the questions, and thank you, of course, to Maria, Chiara, for your time. It's been a pleasure. And
thank you.